Good morning, everyone. Today, I'm announcing the release of the third report by my department outlining the investigation into allegations of clergy abuse. The third report comes from the Diocese of Kalamazoo. Since taking office in 2019, I've pledged to use the resources of my department to ensure that cases of sexual abuse and assault are thoroughly reviewed, and that whenever we are able to pursue criminal charges, we do so relentlessly and aggressively. Our additional promise to the many victims throughout the clergy abuse investigation was to make the results of the investigation transparent at its completion. And to that end, this is the third of 7 reports that we are releasing. We will release a report for each of the 7 dioceses of the Catholic Church here in Michigan. Previously, we released our report on the Marquette Diocese in October of 2022 and the Gaylord Diocese in January of this year. The Kalamazoo Diocese report is a compilation of the information obtained from my department's tip line, victim interviews, police investigations, open source media, paper documents seized from the diocese, and electronic documents found on the diocesan computers, as well as reports of allegations disclosed by the diocese. The Diocese of Kalamazoo agreed to provide reports of abuse directly to the Department of Attorney General. Victims often reach out to their faith leaders to share stories of abuse, and the willingness of the diocese to provide information was instrumental in the compilation of this report. The list of priests for which there were allegations of sexual misconduct against either children or adults since January 1st, 1950, for the Diocese of Kalamazoo that was established in 1971 is derived from information gleaned from a search warrant that was executed against the Diocese of Kalamazoo on October 3rd of 2018, and from the tip line operated by the Department of Attorney General since 2018. There are 19 priests on this list. 12 were ordained or incarnated by the Diocese of Kalamazoo. And I must note that, of course, a criminal charge is merely an allegation, and a defendant is presumed innocent unless and until proven guilty in a court of law. 2 of those named in this report have been charged by my office. Father Brian Stanley, a priest at St. Margaret's Catholic Church in Otsego, was sentenced in January of 2020 to 60 days incarceration and 5 years of probation on 1 count of attempted false imprisonment. Stanley pled guilty in January of 2020 to immobilizing a teenage boy by wrapping him tightly in plastic wrap and using masking tape as additional binding to cover the child's eyes and mouth, leaving him bound and alone in the janitor's room for an extended period of time before returning and eventually letting him go. And this was in 2013. And Father Jacob Bellion, a priest at St. John the Evangelist Parish in Benton Harbor, was charged in May of 2019 with 2 counts of rape under the previous criminal sexual assault statutes. In November 2023, the department was notified that Bellion likely passed while awaiting extradition from India, but we are awaiting formal confirmation from the Department of State of his death, although we're fairly certain of it. This report represents countless hours of work and dedication since the department first executed the search warrants as part of the clergy abuse investigation. And I want to commend the Michigan State Police and, of course, my dedicated staff on their unwavering commitment to securing justice in these tremendously difficult cases. And I especially want to thank the survivors of abuse who have willingly shared their stories, sometimes after decades of silent suffering. Their willingness to come forward helped bring attention to an issue that has affected so many in our state and our country, including, of course, children. As part of my clergy abuse investigation to date, my department has issued criminal charges in 11 cases and has secured convictions in 9, resulting in justice for at least 38 survivors. We've completed the paper document review of the diocese, reviewing more than 1.5 million documents. We've completed the electronic document review of more than 3.5 million documents. We've hired and trained a full-time victim advocate to support the hundreds of victims identified in the course of this investigation. We've continued to refer the completed criminal investigations back to their respective dioceses. And we followed up with victims who have not been interviewed by law enforcement with a trauma-informed, victim-centered interviewer. Now, if you have information about abuse in the Catholic Church, please call my department's hotline at 844-324-3374. Victims of sexual abuse or assault who are in need of resources can also contact 855 Voices 4. We must break down the walls of silence that so often surround sexual abuse and assault. And in the end, we hope that this report provides a voice to those who have suffered in silence for so long, and that it shines a light on those alleged offenders whose actions allowed them to evade true accountability. So with that, I'm gonna, I'd be happy to take some questions. I will tell you that I'm gonna have on here with me Danielle Russo-Bennett, who is our special DV and sexual assault prosecutor and a section head in our criminal division, and the chief of our criminal bureau, Danielle Hageman-Clark. Both of them work tirelessly on these cases and on this report. And so they're on here as well and maybe answering some of the questions that you have.
I'm going to Beth LeBlanc.
Okay.
Hey, thanks. This is Beth with the Detroit News. I think I asked this last time too, but just so I'm clear, like, I know there are 19 priests named in this report. Are you able to go into detail about why only 2 of them were charged? And I guess we don't, I'm curious if there was, just what the reasoning was for not charging them, and if there was sufficient evidence to charge them, or insufficient evidence, or, if they had passed away or had moved out of country or what have you. Just hoping to clarify that.
Sure. And I'm going to let Danielle Russo-Bennett and Danielle Hageman-Clark address that. But I will say, whenever you have an investigation this type, obviously between statute of limitations issues, obviously we're going back decades and decades and decades. So you have, clergy members that have died and a variety of other issues as well. But one of the Danielles like to answer that?
Sure. Thanks for the question. I would say that if you read the report, you can probably get a flavor for why we weren't able to move forward on each of the specific cases. But in general, I can tell you that where we have had the evidence and a priest who was alive with a charge that survived a statute of limitations challenge, we did in fact move forward. I will say that at least with one of these priests, we believe that there was a charge that we could move forward with if we had a victim who would have been willing to participate in a criminal justice investigation. As you can imagine, these are very difficult for some victims to even talk about, and not always are they willing to participate with us. And because of the way that our office works with victims in a trauma-informed and victim-centered way, we do allow them that agency to decide whether or not they want to move forward. We don't use subpoenas or threat of jail time to get victims to cooperate with the criminal investigation, and recognize that while at this time they're not able to move forward or have no desire to participate in a criminal justice process, they may change their mind down the road. And that leaves the door open for us to be able to charge in the future should a victim who says to us, not right now, gives us still that opening to be able to move forward in the future.
Yeah, and if I can follow up on that, I think it's also reflective sometimes in some of the plea offers that are made. We don't always believe that a particular plea offer, if there's a sentence agreement, is reflective of the amount of time that a person should receive for some of these offenses. But of course, we always give as much deference to the victims as possible. And oftentimes, it's their preference. They want to see accountability, but they really don't want to see that defendant in court. They really don't want to have to testify to some of the horrendous abuse that occurred to them in an open courtroom in front of a jury. And so sometimes, again, the justice comes in the way of a person being held accountable in a court of law and having to admit to what they did. And sometimes that is, something that is really helpful for survivors of sexual abuse to be able to move on. And so but it is something to keep in mind in some of these cases, even when we are able to charge.
Yeah, back to Beth. Thank you.
Hey, sorry. I guess, do you guys have a deadline by which you want to get all of these reports out? Can we expect the rest of them to come out before the end of the year, or is there a later date?
Well, definitely before I leave office, these are going to be out. I will tell you, I'll sort of give you chronologically as best as we can. We expect the Lansing report to come out next, followed by Grand Rapids, followed by Saginaw, and then lastly, Detroit, which I think will be the most comprehensive of all of the reports. So I don't have a very specific timeline for you. I will tell you that we're working as hard as possible. We want, of course, these reports to be complete. We want them to be accurate, but we are working as quickly as possible. So, but that is we don't have a very specific timeline, except for to say that I have 2.5 years left in office, and those 4 reports will be released before the end of my term.